What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Chop, the Guillotine League's podcast presented by Mike's Harder. My name is Marcas Grant. Glad to be back with you for another week. 2 weeks of the preseason down, 1 to go. Then we got a weird dead week in there before the live action starts. But as we get you ready for what is the most ruthless, the most diabolical, the fantasy format that is sweeping the nation, I have to introduce you, as always, to my pal and co-conspirator, the one and only Tipp Major. Tipp, how are we feeling? It is the dog days of summer, but we're getting closer to real football. How do you feel?
We are getting closer to football. School has started. I have met my kids' teachers. We're almost here. We're almost here.
We are almost here. Yes, back to school sales are happening. Halloween stuff is going up in the stores. We'll be on to Christmas stuff in like 2 weeks probably. So that means it's time to talk some fantasy football. We're going to take you through what we saw in week 2 of the preseason. We're also going to do a little bit of the prices right as well. But want to start with what we did last week. Last week, we did a draft, a Guillotine League draft. You, me, and 16 of our closest friends went and put some things together, and we kind of sort of talked about it a little bit afterwards, but wanted to dive into it in a little more depth now that we have some time today. And I remember after it was done, I asked you how you felt about your team. You said, I feel okay, which I think is an appropriate response when you're talking about an 18-team draft. Now that you've gotten a few days away from it, it's in the rearview mirror from last Thursday. Do you feel any differently now about your team than you did right afterwards?
No, Marcus is still just okay. I mean, I'm so close to the cut line. It's I'm cautiously optimistic. But I do feel pretty much the same way. The team who's projected to survive the chop line, however, they're calculated to only get like 3 points more than me. So I could really use the help if this team loses, or if they are on the chop week 1 and I get one of their players. I could really use the help. I think so.
That's sort of where I am. I feel okay about my team. I like what I did at the start of the draft. My first 4 picks, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Jacobs, T. Higgins, Caleb Williams, even Kenny Gainwell in the 5th round. Like, I feel like it's a pretty good foundation. I'm sort of keeping my fingers crossed that Josh Jacobs doesn't get any discipline from the league office, because that could really change how this whole thing looks. But it feels like it's good enough to survive. In fact, I made my team name Survive in Advance, because that's the goal. For me, get through the first week or 2, and then you can sort of start cherry picking in places where you need help. Somebody's going to get chopped. You can go and try to find some players off the waiver wire that can fill in the gaps. And ideally, sort of form this thing like Voltron, just kind of have it build week after week. And so that's my goal. Has never been, or is not, I should say, to win any specific week. It's just to be good enough so that you can add pieces along the way. And if you do it right, hopefully by the end, then you're looking at something of a juggernaut of a team. So we'll see. Obviously, the cut line is there. We know it's just a projection. Weird things happen all the time. So who knows how it actually really turns out. But do want to ask you, what was your favorite pick? Maybe it was a pick you made. Maybe it was a pick somebody else made. But which one really jumped out to you?
I mean, I liked some of my picks. I like you talked about your first 4 picks or so. I liked, Jamar Chase, Lamar Jackson was my second pick, Travis Etienne, and then I've kind of went off the deep end on some of the picks after that. But one pick that I like particularly happened in the same round as mine, and as my 4th round pick of Tucker Kraft was Roma Dunze by producer Kelsey. Man, look. The narrative is out now. The narrative is out about his foot. We know that his foot is going to be an issue. He's even said he's going to learn to play with it. So he looks healthy. The offense looks good with him in there. When you get Luther Burden back, or, hopefully that's sooner rather than later. But if it's later, now you've got a bona fide guy who can become the number 1 in this offense. And, another thing too that I like about it is, if you think about it, Roma Dunze was in the 4th round. So that means that if you went heavy on wide receiver, you could have 3 wide receivers and Roma Dunze being your 3rd wide receiver. Or you could, if you wanted to balance it out a little bit more, he could be a number 2. And I love it either way. Either way, I think that he has value on a Ben Johnson offense who is unlocking this talent that he has. And they noticed in training camp that he is a really good contested catch high point guy, and they're going to utilize him all over the field, and that could equate to red zone opportunities as well. So I'm really in on Roma Dunze.
There were a couple of picks that I liked from Just Win Baby, who was at the end of the odd numbered rounds. And so at the end of the 15th, at the end of the fifth, rather, he took Blake Corum. At the end of the seventh, it was Woody Marks. And I know those names don't necessarily jump out at you because they are the RB2s on their respective teams. But I think both of them are going to have larger roles than I think what a lot of people anticipate. There's a lot of talk in LA that Blake Corum could really push for closer to a 50-50 split between he and Kyron Williams. I think you throw in the fact that last year Devontae Adams had 14 touchdown catches. A lot of them were goal line opportunities. If there is such a thing as a wide receiver touchdown vulture, that's what Devontae Adams was last year. I don't necessarily think the Rams are going to be that pass heavy near the goal line this year, which means some of those opportunities could end up going to Blake Corum. And I think when you look at Woody Marks in Houston, yeah, David Montgomery is the RB1, but you're starting to hear a lot more that maybe that could be closer to a 50-50 split. And I think for Marks, the way that he can make hay, especially in fantasy, is to catch the football. That was his calling card in college. And it's something that the Texans didn't, I think, utilize to its fullest last year, but maybe they get a little bit more of that. There's been a lot of excitement about the way he has played in training camp. They're saying that Marks looks explosive, and I think they do want to factor him in more to the offense. This is not going to be a heavy pass offense this year, so maybe there's a chance for Woody Marks. I like both of those picks because I think they potentially have some standalone value. But if nothing else, if we're going through this season and you continue to advance and something happens to Kyron Williams or something happens to David Montgomery, you already have that piece locked in that walks into a big opportunity. So I really did like both of those picks in
I
this
see you,
draft.
Marcus.
You see?
I see you. You're a sly guy. Look, Marcus, darling. I see exactly what you did there.
What?
You did it. You went out there and you put your UFC Trojan up there. Go ahead. Go ahead and do that. Do it for Woody Marks.
Do the fight on? I don't hide that. It's fight on.
I know you don't hide it.
Yeah, it's fight
but
on.
I love it. I
So
love that we're not talking about Woody Marks enough, and I love it. I love what you said about him.
Yeah, I think he's gonna be something that
Yeah.
people who draft him, because you're gonna get him late, you're gonna feel really good about that. I think by the middle point of the season. Anything that you would like a do-over for in this draft?
Yeah, I think I relied too heavily on Jamar Chase, being my wide receiver. And I mean, that's a hell of a wide receiver to rely on, right? But things can go sideways quick. We've seen it happen in several years, with Joe Burrow either getting hurt or Jamar Chase getting banged up. And instead of I relied on my second wide receiver was Wan'Dale Robinson. And we've seen Cam Ward. I think we're going to talk a little bit about him later. But and then Denzel Washington, the talk of the town. Of course, yesterday, Deshaun Watson. I'm not particularly excited about that. And then I drafted a 46-year-old Keenan Allen to go with that. It's like I need Jamar Chase. I need Jamar Chase to have a 2007 Randy Moss type year for this thing to really, really work. Or I need some of these other wide receivers that are on these other teams to get chopped, and then maybe me being a little aggressive with the monies and go out there and get another receiver because I'm going to need one bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a spot that you can sort of make up, I think it is at wide receiver, and I think especially when you look at you got Lamar Jackson, you got Tucker Kraft, even Travis Etienne, who I like a whole lot. I think those guys can be hopefully good enough to keep you afloat. But yeah, I think when it comes down to it, I can imagine you having to be really aggressive on the waiver wire when it comes to the wide receiver position, which means depending on who gets chopped and who's out there, you could end up going a big chunk of your fab on the wide receiver position if it means getting another top level guy in that situation. If I could get a do-over on one, Juwan Jennings in the 9th round, I don't know what happened. I don't. I think there were some things. I think maybe it's because I know I already had a tight end in Dallas Goedert, but I would have been okay with maybe taking Rondé Gadsden, but he went the pick before. I think it just was a situation where I was sort of looking around. I think the clock was running down. I wasn't really sure where to go. So Juwan Jennings is the name that popped up. And look, in San Francisco, I would have felt okay about it because when he was part of that Niners offense, third and Jawan was a real thing. When they needed a play to move the sticks, a lot of times Jawan Jennings was the guy. I don't know that that's going to be the case in Minnesota, even though the quarterback play is going to be better. It's going to be Kyler Murray instead of JJ McCarthy. So that's an upgrade, but I don't know that Kyler Murray is enough to really support multiple pass catchers. Justin Jefferson's going to be fine. Maybe Jordan Addison gets some, although he and Jennings could be splitting. So that was one that, yeah, if I were going to do it over again, I don't know where I would have gone, but it probably wouldn't be Jawan Jennings.
Well, I'm looking at these. I'm looking at these wide receivers that were drafted in the same round. You got Jalen Naylor, Malik Washington, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, I like Jawan Jennings over those guys, but what I really like what you did was a couple rounds later in the 11th, you got Jacoby Lane. I mean, that right there is going to secure that Jawan Jennings. There you go, fight. Yeah, there you go. But that's going to secure you. And then with the news this morning, with Alec Pierce maybe close to returning back to the practice field, that news in of itself. So that Jawan Jennings pick that you made, you may not feel like it was a great pick, but I think you got a couple of really good players that could mask that.
All right. Thank you for making me feel better. I appreciate that.
Of course, Marcus, that's what I'm here for.
Look at some other highlights from this draft. 11 running backs in the first round. So is that too many? Is that not enough? Or Goldilocks, is that just right?
No, it's way too many, but it's an 18-team league, or draft. So I get it. I have the second pick, and you got to wait so long to get for the ball for the pick to come back to you. And it can send you into a little bit of a panic, especially when you start to see these runs happen with specific positions like running back. And so it's one of those things where the running backs, they drop off so much after a certain position. But I was lucky. I got Travis Etienne, who you just talked about. So I was able to get him, and I feel comfortable with him being my number one, especially with Lamar Jackson and Jamar Chase. So having those two, I feel like it could work out for me. But then again, it's like, I know wide receiver is more of where I need to really focus on, week 1 or week 2 of cuts, if I actually am not cut myself. And then I got to look at, now I got to look at who's that other running back, because Rico Dowdle, yeah, he's nice. Okay. But we still don't know. It's a big question mark.
Yeah, I think to your point, right? If you don't take a running back, if you didn't take one, and you got 20 some odd picks before it gets back to you again,
Right.
it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. I took Amon-Ra St. Brown with my first pick, and I see all these running backs go off the board, so I knew to me, it would not have felt great to pass on it again in the second round and hope that something came back to you. So that's why I took Josh Jacobs. If I don't, I might be looking at a Quinshon Judkins or a DeAndre Swift as my RB1, which I wouldn't feel particularly great about. Maybe I would have strengthened my wide receiver position. Maybe I could have gotten a top 3 tight end, but I just know I would have looked at my running back room and I would have felt queasy about it. So I definitely was about, like, I need to get one in the second round, so at least I can have one guy that I feel okay with, and then I can sort of backfill with a bunch of other guys later on in the draft, and that's kind of how it worked out for me. Round 4 is where we saw a ton of quarterbacks. We had Josh Allen, who went off at the end of the first round. Lamar Jackson, you took near the end of the second round. Joe Burrow went later in the third round. But in round 4, we had Drake May, we had Jaden Daniels. I took Caleb Williams, and then Jalen Hurts rounded out all the QBs in that round. For you, when are you starting to look at filling the quarterback spot in a draft like this?
Yeah, in PPR redraft, those 1 QB leagues, I'm waiting, no doubt. I'm not doing, but I can't do that in an 18-team league. And you want to set yourself apart also, especially in week 1. And you're going to look at their matchups. You want to look at the player themselves. Are they a dynamic player? And that's why I went with Lamar Jackson in the second. But I think that you have to start really thinking about, because I saw in rounds 13 alone, you had Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith. I took Tua Tagovailoa. You guys stop laughing. I know but I did. I took it in round 13. So what I would recommend in a 1 QB 18 team league is you need to really start thinking about it in rounds 5 or 6. Okay, I see these quarterbacks are gone. I really need to start thinking about a quarterback. And if you want to be the one to wait on a quarterback, I wouldn't be the one to wait until the 13th round because those are some of the quarterbacks I just named off. What I would do is I would probably wait at latest by the 8th round because in the 8th round we saw quarterbacks like let's see here. We saw quarterbacks like Jared Goff, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield. I feel a little bit more comfortable getting players like that as opposed to either going really high on a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. I feel good in the 8th round to do something like that in the 18 team.
Yeah, I mean, I think you talk about the 8th round guys, maybe even some of the 9th round guys. That is sort of where the floor gets a little bit shaky. And I think in a draft like this, you are shooting more for a stable floor than a high ceiling. High ceilings are great. Stable floors are better because that gives you a consistency of scoring week to week and prevents you from being on the chopping block. It's round 8 or 9 where it starts to get a little bit shaky. You mentioned Goff, Murray, Mayfield. Malik Willis is where I start to get a little bit worried. Then, the ninth
Yeah.
round, you got Tyler Shuck, you got Jordan Love. That's kind of where, like, all right, that's the point to me where I'm like, I'm not feeling great about it. In a redraft league, it's fine. You draft a Tyler Shuck, and then you draft another quarterback that you feel like can sort of complement and fill in. Here, you might only get 1 week of that. You might not get a chance to use the other quarterback because you could be gone. So that's, I think for me, it's kind of why I felt good going in the 4th round because I got a guy in Caleb Williams that I can feel confident in that is going to not only give me that stable floor, but also has a little bit of a higher ceiling as well. And then I don't have to worry about it. I did take another quarterback late. I took Geno Smith in the 13th round,
That was a
but
good one. Yeah.
that to me feels like very much insurance that hopefully I will
Right.
never ever have to cash in. But as we talk about those later rounds, 12, 13, 14, right at the end of the draft, what is your advice to people on handling those situations?
Do like Bon Jovi said and start living on a prayer because you're gonna start really seeing these players like you're like, man, it gets intimidating in those rounds, but it's like, what do I do? And you start seeing players like Terrence Ferguson in later rounds, and that warmed my heart because I've been singing his praises since last year, and Devon Vele, who I think could make an impact on certain teams, especially with Jordan Tyson being out for a few months or a couple of months. So it's one of those things where you know you don't want to necessarily close your eyes and just press the button because there are some gems in there, and I just talked about a couple of them that could make an impact week 1.
Yeah, that Terrence Ferguson pick, I hated it because I loved it so much because that was where I was gonna go. We were doing the show and the draft was happening, and I believe it was Chris Allen that took him. And so when I was on the clock, I'm like, "Ooh, I'm gonna take Terrence Ferguson here," and I'm scrolling and scrolling, I don't see it, and then I hit the search bar and I type in Ferguson, and it's not there, and I look, and I was just heart sick because that was the move I was gonna make. Chris just got to him a couple of picks before I did, but I do love that pick there. I would also say this is where I might differ in redraft leagues. In redraft leagues in the late rounds, I'm swinging for upside. I'm looking at those
Yeah.
guys that maybe don't have an immediate role, but potentially could blossom into something. I feel like here, and admittedly, I took some upside guys, right? I took CJ Daniels, I took Trey Harris. Those are more upside guys. But I also took a guy like Geno Smith, where, okay, maybe it's that familiarity, maybe the ceiling isn't particularly high, but I at least can be comforted that I know kind of about what I'm going to get out of Geno Smith. So I think I would be okay with falling back on those familiar names that just give you a little bit more stability. But redraft, I definitely want to swing for the fences. So it's just kind of a difference of opinion in how you handle one kind of format versus another kind of format. One thing we are for sure handling is the week 2 of the preseason. We watched all of the games, or at least we pretended to watch all of the games. But we do have some takeaways, things that we saw and how it impacts our drafting life. So I want to start in New York, Tip, where
Wow.
there's some talk that Tyrone Tracy's roster spot could be in jeopardy. He has not played particularly well. We know they've got Cam Scatterboo. Devin Singletary is still a guy that's going to get some opportunities. They signed Najee Harris. And then on top of that, Tracy, a bad game over the weekend, a big fumble in the ball game when the Giants were driving. So right now, if you were picking an RB2, if you were looking for that insurance for Cam Scatterbo, who is it?
Yeah, it's kind of, one of those things that you don't want a part of with this timeshare unless there's an injury. So that's what you asked. So who could it be? Uh, it sounds like it could be Najee Harris in this case because
Ooh.
there is familiarity with Greg Roman, who is running with the running backs over there. There is familiarity with John Harbaugh with Greg Roman, so they're going to want to run the ball. And another thing I can tell you too is Najee Harris isn't going to do what Tyrone Tracy did and just miss a complete assignment and just get the quarterback blown up like that. And Najee Harris also, the other thing too is he's a pass catching running back, so he can catch those passes too. Now, ball security has been a concern of his late in the past, but really the thing was he never got hurt. He never got hurt until this Achilles injury he had a couple of years ago. Now he's working his way back. I think that he could become viable option in this offense. It's just it's going to be all three, and now like you said, Devon Singletary. It's going to be this committee or this timeshare that I just don't want a part of.
Do not want. And I was sort of skeptical on Cam Scatterbo, mostly just because I don't want to spend a higher round pick on a guy that could be hurt and miss a long stretch of the season just because of his play style. Now you throw in two or three other running backs to the mix, and it's just not a great situation for me. I don't want any part of it. I would say if you're asking me to pick, which I guess is the purpose of this exercise we're doing, it's Devin Singletary. Um, but that doesn't excite me a whole lot. I guess if I'm taking a Giants running back, if I can hold my nose and take Cam Scatterbo and pray for the best, that's what I'm doing. Everything else, I'm hands off on in Giants camp. Staying in New York or New Jersey or wherever, Geno Smith back with the Jets again. He's looked good in the preseason. Geno Smith has been on point. I took him in the 13th round of our Guillotine League draft. I'm not asking this just for me, but in a real sense, could Geno Smith be a late round value this year?
You know what, guys? I've seen Marcus in person. I can actually confirm that he is like a better looking cousin of Geno Smith. So,
Thank you.
so I will say that. I will say that. But no, I really think so, man. He looked like he had command of the offense. He looked prepared. He looks like he's working it already with the run game and Frank Reich over there coordinating the offense. This offense looked really good, and you've got really good players like Garrett Wilson. You've got Brees Hall, who will be coming back hopefully week one. And so you've got some dynamic players on here. And if you get an offensive line, that's always been the thing with Geno Smith is if you can get him solid protection, and get him some pass catchers. Both of those check out to me so far with Jets camp and what we've seen in the preseason. So I think it's going to be tremendous value, and I love that as a number two for you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, immediately when they made the move and they brought Geno Smith back, I sort of just blew it off, right? Like, as he famously said a couple years ago, they wrote me off. I ain't right back though. So like I admit, I kind of wrote him off. Hopefully he writes me back if I decide to go and draft him late. He's played really well. And I know the knee-jerk reaction for all of us is the Jets, but maybe there's something there. And again, where you're drafting him, you're not counting on him week to week. It's worth a draft and stash and seeing if maybe he rekindles something with Gang Green there in New York. Over to the West Coast, where Deshaun Stribling has had a really impressive preseason for the 49ers. He has been pressed into service in part because they need him to be there. Could he be worth reaching for in drafts this year?
Yeah, I think so. In our Guillotine League, he went in the eighth round, and I think that's tremendous. I think that's like right at the sweet spot with him. But with what we've seen in this preseason, and with some of the injury concerns that they've had, and they've got Deebo Samuel, they got George Kittle. These guys are not necessarily the youngest of the batch. So, and Mike Evans too. Let's don't forget about him. But all of these guys will be using that Geritol, will be using that Icy Hot later on in the season, while the young bucks. Stribling is over there just catching passes. I think there's actually a really good connection between him and Brock Purdy from what I saw on preseason. Yeah, again, we know it's preseason, but you still look for things like that. And I saw that there was a couple of passes that Brock Purdy was like, "All right, young guy, let's go see what you can do." And he went out there and did it. So I love it.
Do they still make Geritol? I don't think I've seen
I
it
don't
or
know.
heard about it
That was the
in
first
years.
thing that came to my head. I was like, what do old people take? Geritol. Because I remember my grandmother taking it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That aside, I think there's a real big opportunity for Stribling here. In part just because, again, they sort of need him to be there. Ricky Pearsall is gone for the year. I haven't heard the name Christian Kirk in several weeks. He has been, to no one's surprise, banged up. Mike Evans sat out a little bit during training camp as he was kind of resting up and getting healthy a little bit. I do have concerns about George Kittle. It's pointing toward him playing in week 1, but I do have concerns about whether or not he's going to be the same guy coming off an Achilles injury. So there's a real chance for Dejon Stribling to step in and be productive pretty much from the jump. We'll see how the Niners use him in the regular season. We'll see how comfortable Brock Purdy is with him in the regular season, but I definitely think he is worth a mid-round ad and seeing if you maybe end up with a solid wide receiver 3 or a flex option based on what the Niners are going to do with him there. Over to Tennessee, Cam Ward has not looked great in the preseason. He's limited missed opportunities for him and the Titans offense. I know everybody's excited about Carnell Tate. I think when it comes to every other Titan, it's sort of a kind of a so how cautious do you think we should be with this Tennessee offense?
Watch it, Marcus. Now you're talking about Wan'Dale Robinson, my number 2.
Okay. My
I
bad.
look,
Yes,
I
I
look,
forgot about
no,
that.
I look, no, I'm a little nervous though, man, because I was really beating the drum, and then I watched the quarterback show on Netflix, and I was like, man, okay, Cam Ward, he seems like he's, if he's not gonna get control, he's gonna demand the control of the room, and I just don't know. He did go against the Seattle Seahawks. That's a really good defense. It's tough when you're going against a good defense, and they're already in midseason form, but you want to see more from him. So in the offense right now, I think they need a few more preseason weeks. So I call that week 1 through 3, and see how this offense is gelling by that time. Hopefully Wan'Dale Robinson can get some pass catches and they can get in line. But good luck with that, man. I think this is, I'm starting to even move, because I was higher on Cam Ward. I'm starting to really move him down in my latest rankings now, because it's just, I don't know if we can trust it yet.
The Titans offense is it just is, right? I
Yeah.
don't it's nobody thinks it's going to be great. Maybe
Right.
it's not going to be the worst offense. It just sort of is. And like the
Mm.
guys they have there just sort of are. I know people are excited about Carnell Tate. I do see a path where Wan'Dale Robinson can outperform his ADP. I do think that's possible, but I just don't think you're going to look at the Titans offense and be like, yeah, man, I got to get me a piece of that. And so I haven't been super gung ho on drafting them. Um, I'm not necessarily actively avoiding them. They're just kind of there for me. Is sort of how
Mm.
I feel about that. But that gets us to the good, the bad, and the ugly. Please
Look
don't
at,
sue us.
okay.
Please don't sue us for that. It did make me think, as we're talking about the Titans here, who is a good player on a bad offense that you're interested in? Let's say after round 3, right? Because there's some guys that are,
Okay.
Devon Achane is a good player on a bad offense. We're absolutely drafting him, no doubt about it. But if you wait a couple rounds, good player on a bad offense that you're still willing to take a
Yeah.
chance on.
Yeah, and I need to change this up on the fly, but it's for me. I'm looking at a player like Denzel Boston. Yeah, I took the shot on him, and I see. Okay, everybody's talking, everybody's dogging Deshaun Watson, everybody's dogging this offense. There's been so many just talk of the town quotes about this offense, but couldn't we just see a situation or a scenario in week 1 that they just come out of nowhere and they score like 35 points, and we're just like, what? I think that could happen with them. I really think that they got this back against the wall mentality. I mean, they are going against a tough opponent, but it's week 1. Anything really crazy happens week 1. So I'm going to go with Denzel Boston as my first guy. I think that he's really going to raise some eyebrows.
It's interesting because when we've talked about the Browns and the wide receivers, KC Conception is the name that tends to jump off the tongue first. And I don't think we've talked as much about Denzel Boston. I appreciate your optimism about the Browns dump trucking a bunch of points on somebody in week 1 of the season. They do start on the road against Jacksonville.
That's gonna be tough.
Anything can happen, but I respect and I appreciate the optimism with a guy like Denzel Boston and the Browns. I'm looking at Jonathan Brooks, and I've started to kind of buy
Yeah.
into the hype a little bit. I was skeptical. I'm the kind of person I need to see it, and especially when you're talking about a player who has dealt with serious injuries in consecutive years that has kept him off the field. I remember what he was at Texas. I do, but I just needed to see it. But started to see a little bit more of it. Granted, he's had limited time in the preseason, but the reports have been really good out of Carolina Panthers camp. There's a chance for him to really push for a pretty big workload early in the season. Chuba Hubbard is dealing with a little bit of injury issues as well. So things seem to be pointing in the right direction. And because of where he's going, depending on how you start your draft, he could be your third running back. It's sort of the way you talked about Romo Dunze. Depending on how you start your draft, though, Dunze could be your third wide receiver. I think Brooks could be your third running back potentially. I'm willing to take that shot as an RB3. And if he does turn into something, if he does have that explosiveness back, if he does work his way into a bigger workload, then all of a sudden you really do have something there. So he's a guy that I'm starting to get more and more excited about as we get closer to the season. Anybody else you like? Good player on
Yeah.
a bad offense.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go. I'm going home on this one, man. And we got and we'll talk a little bit about it later. But the Ashton Jeanty news, and then immediately, I've been liking Mike Washington Jr. I didn't think that he was going to really have a threat to Ashton Jeanty, but now this has happened, and we still aren't in the complete clear, even though we know that it wasn't as serious as once we thought. So Mike Washington Jr., bad offense, who I think offense for my Raiders is going to be a lot better than what people think. Maybe not as good now with Ashton Jeanty leaving, but Mike Washington Jr., from all accounts that everybody's been talking about in training camp, he's been running with the ones. Even with Ashton Jeanty healthy, he was still running with the ones. So I'm not going to change my tune on Jeanty, especially once he gets healthy. I think he is the guy. But this Mike Washington Jr. is something to definitely and look, he went in the 11th, 10th round. Like, yeah, these guys. This is one of those players that I think could make an impact immediately in the middle and maybe later on down the road too. So it's something to behold.
He was kind of a combine hero. He had a great
Yeah.
workout of the combine, and I know that doesn't always translate into anything, but it's something to at least get your attention so that when you get to training camp and in the event of a situation like what we got with Ashton Jeanty, we will talk about him in just a bit, that it's suddenly he's top of mind now. So all of a sudden, Jeanty gets a little banged up. You can look at a Washington and say, hey, you know what? I've seen this dude at least put something good on tape, and that makes it interesting. I know that in the immediate aftermath, his ADP shot up. We'll see whether or not it sort of levels out as we get more information about Ashton Jeanty. So, a lot can change in 5 years. The price of your internet will not with Xfinity's 5-year price guarantee. Now, sports are unpredictable, but your internet price shouldn't be. Get a reliable price for a reliable connection. 5 years on the most reliable fiber-powered Wi-Fi with our best equipment. All in means all in. Get everything you need included. Data, equipment, and the most reliable Wi-Fi. Lock in 5 years of predictability. 5 years, the same price, no contracts or commitments. You can learn more at Xfinity.com. Restrictions apply. Select plans only. Time now for some letters from camp as we get through some of the news headlines. And as we mentioned, the Ashton Jeanty news jumps off the page. First, I want to ask you your thoughts as a Raider fan, because when it first hit, it seemed like it was devastating that he couldn't put any weight on it. He was helped off the field. The players all took a knee and gathered in a prayer circle. I don't know if they lit candles or not, but it seemed bleak. I would think that as a Raider fan, like your heart had to be in your stomach at that point.
Oh, it was down through the floor, Marcus. I was like, my wife was like, she looked at me and she was like, why do you have this blank look on your face? And I'm just like, Ashton Jeanty. And she's like, what? And that's like Ashton Jeanty. And she's like, oh, the running back guy? And I was like, yes. And so I said, where's the sage? Where's the Palo Santo? Where's the prayer book? Like, we need it all. So I literally just started praying and just being like, dude, whatever it is, like please just like let it be not as bad as it was. Or is it as it was, and it was told to us so just vaguely and just so graphic. It was just it was vague and graphic at the same time. It was like his knee went the wrong way, and then or at first it was a knee, then it was the team rallying around him praying, and it was just like I couldn't take it, and I was just glued to my computer, to my phone, reading all sorts of tweets. It was bad. So what does it mean though for Guillotine League? Oh, I'm sorry, Marcus, that was your
No,
fault.
go me like that was my next question. So what does it mean for Guillotine League? So apparently, apparently it's just an ankle sprain and not his knee being dislocated from his body or something.
Right. So, I think you can drop him down around maybe 2, just because it seems like he's avoided the high ankle sprain, but we don't know the severity of if it is the low ankle sprain. We don't know that severity yet too. And I haven't seen anything just of yet. So he could still miss a week, maybe 2. Depending on, swelling and things like that. So I'm not going to drop him down too far. But then again, you have to understand, guys, this is a guillotine league. So you don't want to just give free points. So in this format, you may drop him down even more. So it's a really tricky situation. Honestly, until we get more clarity, if you're doing a guillotine league right now or later today, and again, like I said, until we get that clarity, I'm not touching him. I'm not going to do it. I don't care if he gets down to the 5th round, 6th round. I can't do it unless he gets down like 8th, 9th round. Then I would consider it, because I have some pieces to have while he is hurt.
This is the worst thing, right? And you've got a high level player with an injury this close to the start of the regular season and no real information about it. The Raiders are saying they don't consider it to be a long-term injury, but what is considered long term? Does he miss week 1? Does he miss the first 2 weeks? We have no idea. And so, like, now you really do have to make a decision, right? How far do you let him fall? Especially, like, as you said, if you're drafting soon, before you can probably get a complete picture of what we know about Ashton Jeanty, you really do have to make some hard choices. And if you guess right, congrats. If you don't, good luck. That is honestly the best advice we can give at this point, because we're not working with a full complement of information at this point. The Houston Texans making a move to bolster their wide receiver room after the Jaden Higgins knee injury that's going to keep him out for the remainder of the season. Kayshon Boutte comes over from the New England Patriots. I think when he was in New England, I think there was mild interest, maybe even less than that, especially with A.J. Brown there now. With Boutte moving to Houston now, a wide receiver room that's a little bit more competitive, any more interest in maybe drafting him?
Yes, absolutely. I think he needed to get out of that situation in New England, because he was just going to get lost unless there was, some devastating injuries in that wide receiver room. He was just going to get lost in that mixed. So he needed to find somewhere. I wish my Raiders would have tried to at least kick the tires on him too, because you know what, Marcus, it's you may not know this, but it's a well documented that I am a Boutte guy. So I like me some Boutte, man. I'm not gonna lie. So I will tell you this, and I like Kayshon Boutte too. Last year he had a coming out party. He had 16 and over 16 and a half yards per catch. And one thing that I liked about him, the yards per target, he led all qualified wide receivers, averaging roughly 12 receiving yards every time the ball was thrown to him. And he has good contested catchability as well. We saw that several times last year, that he was making these just acrobatic catches. I think the Texans needed that. They had Jaden Higgins. He was going to be their number 2. They really didn't have anything after that. You're not going to put a bunch of onus on Tank Dell, a guy coming back, his first season coming back from that knee injury. So I think this was a great move for the Texans, and I think this gives C.J. Stroud another element, another piece, and one of those guys who can make those contested catches if C.J. Stroud's ball is not that accurate, which it tends to be sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I still think Booty is a reserve guy, right? He's at best a wide receiver 3, probably more in the wide receiver 4 range just because of that offense. But there is increased value there. He gets out of New England
Right.
where it was going to be really crowded. It was going to be really hard to battle for targets. This gives him more of an opportunity to be on the field, to get some opportunities. So for that reason alone, I think the ADP comes up. Just don't go crazy with it. Is what I would say. Um, in Cleveland, Deshaun Watson is QB1, at least for week one. Todd Monken saying it is not a week to week thing. So Deshaun Watson uh, gets the job. He had an interesting press conference over the weekend where he didn't necessarily make a whole lot of friends in the Cleveland area. But that part aside, what and how and why? I don't really get that. We'll leave that part alone. The bigger question is, I know you talked about Denzel Boston. Are
Yeah.
you okay drafting Boston knowing who the quarterback is?
I'm okay because of you. If anything, you're gonna get even more of a discount now because the camp hype was a lot on Denzel Boston being the best receiver on the team, and then Concepcion came on strong as well. But you know, I think people were starting to have him climb up the ranks a little bit. Now with the Deshaun Watson news and Deshaun Watson opening his mouth a little too much and Deshaun Watson not playing great on the field, I think that you can get him at a little bit of a dip. And the other one I like is Dylan Sampson because again, you're getting those guys at a dip. The ones I'm not high on, because again, I'm not particularly high on Deshaun Watson being the quarterback here after what we've seen, is Harold Fannin Jr., Quinshon Judkins, those guys, because you're still going to pay. You may get a little bit of a dip as well, not much on Judkins, but on Harold Fannin because he's a pass catcher. But you're not going to get that much of a dip. I'm going to be very cautious on there. I would rather fall to those secondary players like the Bostons, like the Sampsons, if I want to even go that route or kick the tires on the Cleveland Browns. But we also got to understand it could be one of those situations where this offense is not that bad. Like, we got to really see it on paper. We got to really see it after the preseason. We don't have time right now to do it. But if you're looking to, with your fab budgets or these teams that lose these players that we're talking about, maybe you want to consider that then because they might be one of those diamonds in the rough later on in the season if this offense is good. So we got to see that too.
I think I'm out on Quinshon Judkins mostly just because I don't. I think game script is going to be against him in the second half. I think they're going to be playing from behind. I think they're going to have to throw the football. I like Harold Fannin, but I could also see by mid-season needing to move on from him. I think early in the year, as everybody's still trying to learn each other and learn the offense, I think Fannin is the consistency. He was the guy who sort of broke out last year. I think if he's running those shorter routes, those intermediate routes, because everything we saw from Watson in preseason was checkdowns. He was really bad at throws of over 10 yards in the air. So that does seem to work out well for Fannin. But again, I could also see that by the time we get to like week 7 or 8, you're starting to see him phased out and maybe somebody else is in there. So if I'm drafting Fannin, I'm also probably drafting another tight end a little bit later, or at least in a guillotine league, I'm looking to pick one up off waivers and make sure I have that in my back pocket just when things start to go sideways a little bit. More quarterback situations. This one in Atlanta. Michael Penix Jr. has been cleared to practice, and the early scuttlebutt, good word, scuttlebutt. The early scuttlebutt is that he has the inside track to the QB1 job. That's got to feel not great for Tua that he's going to lose a starting quarterback job to a guy who couldn't even practice. Which of those two, understanding that you did sort of panic draft Tua at the end of our Guillotine League draft, between the two of them, though, who would you prefer as a starter if you are drafting other Falcons?
It's Michael Penix. After the news that came out just a couple of days ago and has been coming out about him, I'm shocked. I didn't think that it seemed more bleak a couple of weeks ago. It seemed like, oh, he's just doing 7-on-7s, no end it, no, we don't know when he's going to begin 11-on-11s, and all of a sudden they hit the light switch turns. I don't know. So it's Michael Penix for me. Tua has been playing way too timid in the preseason. He doesn't even command it to me when I watch the game. That one series or two that he had, he just didn't look. He looks like he's just playing way too safe. dude, let it rip. Let these players know that, hey, you're coming in here to lead this team. Tua just has, to me, it seems like he has leadership issues. And Michael Penix Jr., with him working his way back, with him fighting his way back to get to that, I think the team has saw that in the coach who, may not be as fond of Tua's play as what he may have thought at the beginning, is now looking at, okay, now let's see if Michael Penix can take over this position.
Yeah, I mean, I think Penix is the guy they want, right? They drafted him a couple years ago with the thought
Yeah.
that he was going to replace Kirk Cousins. Hasn't really been able to stay healthy. Even when he has, he's been fine, I guess. It's kind of
Mhm.
been meh watching him play, but I do think for Tua, uh, he's a lot closer to the end of his career at this point than the beginning. And I don't know that there's a resurrection coming for him in Atlanta. I look, I'm still on the Drake London train regardless, but I think I'd feel a little bit better with Michael Penix than I would
Yeah.
with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback. Last one here, and this is not necessarily relevant to this fantasy season, but fantasy seasons past. Nick Chubb has announced his retirement from the NFL. A guy who, when he was healthy, was as big of a beast as anybody in the league. Maybe the best, just pure old school type running back that we have seen in a long time. Unfortunately, knee injuries just kind of took their toll. So he has announced his retirement. Thing I always like to ask when a guy like this finally hangs it up: is Nick Chubb a fantasy Hall of Famer?
Shout out to him. Congratulations on a wonderful career. But no, he's not. And there's a couple of reasons why. One reason I saw was in his best season in 2022. He didn't even finish as a top 5 running back. I mean, you had guys like Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey. They were doing major work too. So I think in order to really, for me to solidify you in the fantasy Hall of Fame, again, this is fantasy Hall of Fame, you've got to at least secure a running back or a wide receiver or a positional number 1 spot, and then do something crazy in that year. And another thing too, I'm going to hold against him. He never had more than 36 receptions in a season. I just look in this era, in this day and age, I agree with you, Marcus. I think pure running, he's one of the best that we've saw here in the last 10, 15 years. But I need you to catch the ball too. That's part of the running back's job. And with him having 36, I know it wasn't necessarily his game, but 36 tells me you could at least do it. So I would like to have seen him at least have another season where maybe bumped up to 40, 45, maybe even 50.
Yeah, I think because the game was one dimensional. He was very good running the football, but it was a one
Right.
dimensional style game, and because just injuries sort of prevented him from any real longevity, I think it's hard to put him there. I think everything you said is completely fair. But he was still a joy to watch, and congratulations on
Was.
the career, and all the best to Nick Chubb in retirement. All right, going to round out the show with a little bit of The Price is Right. This is the quarterback edition. We did running backs last week, so let's go to the signal calls. We also did some wide receivers, so you can do the math and figure out what position we'll do next week. But that's next week. We'll start with Trevor Lawrence. An ADP of 88.6. He's going just after Justin Herbert, just ahead of Jackson Dart. Tip major, is the price right?
The price is right here, but here we go with the offensive line issues and with the Chargers, with Tyler Biotish being out. But I have heard that the second round pick, Jake Slaughter, which is a great name for a football player, has been turning some heads and getting high praises from his coaching staff. Plus plus I love the talent around that surrounds Justin Herbert. So I'm going to have Justin Herbert as my number 1 in this group, followed by Trevor Lawrence, and then Jackson Dart rounding it out.
Yeah, I've said plenty of times I am out on Jackson Dart. I do think there's some
Yeah.
big things coming for Justin Herbert in that Mike McDaniel offense, but man, they got to keep some offensive linemen healthy. They just can't seem to do that in Los Angeles. In Minnesota, Kyler Murray has an ADP of 120.4. He is going after Jared Goff. He's going ahead of Baker Mayfield. Do you like that price for him?
So I think this price is right too. I the thing that you really like with Kyler Murray is the running ability. So, and I also heard that he's been building chemistry with not only Justin Jefferson but all of his receivers, including T.J. Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, and your guy Jawan Jennings. I heard that he's been working on his chemistry there too. So that in of itself tells me that maybe he's trying to get out of that, one wide receiver or go type of situation where he can spread the ball a little bit more. Hopefully the offensive line holds up. That's also a concern. So I'm intrigued. So I do have it like this though. I have it where Kyler Murray, because of the rushing upside, I have Jared Goff, and then I have it Baker Mayfield. So I think the price is right here.
Am I crazy? Maybe it's just the inconsistency. Maybe it's just because Kyler has never really lived up to that. Was it the 2020 season when he had 800 rushing
Yeah.
yards? And we keep wanting that to come back, and I just don't think it ever will. Um, I got Goff one of this group. I say Goff one. I might put Baker ahead of Kyler just because I
Right
don't know. I,
on.
I feel like I feel like I know what I'm going to get with Baker generally on a week to week basis. Now, I will throw in the caveat that we have not seen Baker Mayfield without Mike Evans. That's a new thing in Tampa Bay. So that part is maybe a little bit concerning. I don't know. I think just because every time I've drafted Kyler or every time I've gotten excited about Kyler, I have been left underwhelmed. Maybe I've just been burned one too many times. And maybe I can't see it objectively. I don't know. But for whatever reason, I can't I can't with
Kyler
Kyler right
Murray,
now.
Kyler Murray has done you and a lot of other people wrong in fantasy, and it's just you don't want to keep going back to that. Well, I understand it. I think for me, he really hasn't done me wrong because I've really never had Kyler Murray on any of my teams. I think maybe there was like a Scott Fish Bowl or something, like a couple of
Mm.
like, but never really going heavy in on him. This time I'm like, all right, let me give him a shot because everybody is been talking about the guy, talking about how, and in one of my other guillotine leagues, I did that. I went with Kyler Murray. So I'm intrigued to see what this is going to look like.
The only thing I really want from Kyler Murray is just bring us back Justin Jefferson. Just give Jettis back to
Oh,
us.
yes,
That is the
please.
that is the number one job for Kyler Murray in my eyes this season. Um, Malik Willis, who was
Oh.
sort of a hype bunny during free agency, he went to Miami. We're like, "Ooh, this could be interesting," and then Miami got rid of all their wide receivers. They're like, "This is not interesting anymore." The ADP 152.2. He's going just after Tyler Shuck, just ahead of Sam Darnold. Are you cool with that?
I have this is the price is wrong. I have Shuck above Willis, and if Jordan Tyson wasn't out, I would probably even have I would have Shuck above Darnold. But I have it Darnold first, and then I have Shuck, and then Willis. And look, Marcus, I know I've said it on here before. I've said it on various different platforms. I just don't want to trust this Dolphins team. I know that they've done some really cool things in the preseason, but again, I just have a tough time trusting Kevin Patullo and Bobby Slowick with this guy, Malik Willis, who just hasn't had enough opportunities or enough starts. So it's just something. And the wide receiver room. I mean, we're dealing with just Devon A-Chain, and I don't know if I can do it, man. I just don't feel comfortable.
The offense is bad. And I mean, let's be honest, we don't really have a large sample size for Malik Willis. He's had a couple of nice games when he came in, late in the season as a starter and he played well, but it's still a relatively small sample size. And what does it look like when that's stretched out over 17 games? I haven't found it in myself to get as excited about Malik Willis as a lot of other people, but I guess at that point you're basically not paying much in ADP, but I think I'd still rather take some of the other guys. That I would much rather take Tyler Shuck than Malik Willis. I will let somebody else kind of deal with that headache, and if I'm wrong, so be it. I don't think I'm going to be so wrong on it that it's be like, we're going to be sitting here talking about Malik. Well, hey man, Malik Willis is a top 8 quarterback. Did we see that? Like, I don't think we're going to be talking about that. So I'm fine with being okay about that. Last one. Jacoby Brissett's ADP of 191.5. We are talking dead last pretty much in the draft. I mean, your last couple of rounds is what you're looking at here. He goes ahead, or goes after Bryce Young, rather, and ahead of
Mm,
Aaron Rodgers. Is the
mm.
price right?
The price is wrong. Did we see what the guy did last year? I mean, they had the most pass attempts thanks to that bad defense over there. So they were always getting into shootouts with the other teams. and playing from way from behind. So I can't trust Bryce Young at all, man. It's just so hard for me to trust the guy who is dealing with a bad offensive line. He's not a big guy to already deal for that. And his wide receivers, they're decent, they're formidable, but I just don't trust that offensive line. Brissett is always a sneaky player against other defenses with those wide receivers that he has in Michael Wilson Jr. and Marvin Harrison Jr., who's been coming on really a lot here lately. And I didn't even talk about Trey McBride. He's got weapons at his disposal that fit the fantasy need. Now, I think a lot of people look at the Cardinals, they look at it, oh, it's just the Cardinals. Oh, it's just the Jets. Oh, it's just the Browns. Like, you got to also understand that some of these teams, specifically the Cardinals, created a lot of fantasy points for you, specifically at the end of the year when we needed them the most. And Brissett was right on the end of that. So I think that we also have to understand it's Aaron Rodgers. Anybody drafting Aaron Rodgers might need to take some Geritol, because it's just, like, there is no reason why in any fantasy format, unless it's a old geezer format where you got to play the oldest player, and I'm pretty sure there's probably a league out there that is like that. Like that is the only reason you're playing. I don't understand it. Other than running the ball and playing good defense, they're gonna really have this guy chunk the ball 30 plus times a game. His arm's gonna fall off, Marcas.
Yeah, no parts of Aaron Rodgers for me. Very little of Bryce Young. I'll take Jacoby Brissett, understanding
Yeah.
Carson Beck may take over at some point, but I'm not asking Brissett to carry my team all year long. Taking him late, having him fill in when I need to, that's going to be good enough for me for that. So there you go. That is our edition of The Price is Right. And that'll do it for this edition of Shop. Thanks to our man Mick for production assistance. For everybody else out there, stay happy, safe, and healthy. Do good and live well. Enjoy the days, everybody. We'll be back with you on Thursday. That's it.